Hi, class. It's Dr. Lindner. Let's take a look at the histology of bone. Bone contains ECM. ECM is extracellular matrix that surrounds widely separated cells. Remember what connective tissue compared to epithelial or epithelium. Epithelium is when you have a bunch of cells that are closely packed together, like cuboidal cells, with very little extracellular matrix. But connective tissue is when you have cells that are scattered far apart and you have lots of proteins, you have lots of extracellular matrix, and the cells are separated. That's connective tissue. So the ECM is about 15% water, about 30% collagen, and about 55% mineralized salts. So the inorganic material, which are the salts, they're going to provide the hardness. That's made up of calcium, calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and typically in a lot of the supplements, the good nutraceutical companies will sell it in this form. It's called hydroxyapatite. It's highly, highly absorbable. Okay. The organic components, such as the collagen fibers, they provide for some of the flexibility of the bone. Okay, they give a little bit of their tensile strength, but there's a little bit of give there. And you have to be careful in terms of the pH, because if you change the pH and becomes too acidic, you can remove the minerals with an acid, and then you're left with a rubbery, soft structure. Mineralization is referred to as calcification. That's the hardening of the tissue when the mineral crystals deposit around the collagen fibers. So you have the collagen, which are like the steel reinforcing rods, and then all around it, you're going to have calcium deposition. Bone is not completely solid. It has small spaces for blood vessels, and then you have the red marrow, and you've got yellow marrow as well. Spongy bone has more spaces. That's the trabecula. That's where you have this type of porous type of structure. That's trabecula. Compact bone has few spaces. Now, when we look at the histology of bone, we have to mention the four types of bone cells. We have four types. We have the osteoprogenitor cells, which are the stem cells, and these are able to differentiate into other types of cells. The osteoprogenitor can evolve into an osteoblast, and this is an immature cell, and it's the bone building cell, meaning it's going to secrete the matrix. When the osteoblast produces the matrix and it gets stuck in its own matrix, because think of the matrix as the cement, those calcium salts calcify and mineralize, the osteoblast gets trapped within itself, and now it evolves into a mature bone cell called an osteocyte. That's what sits in the lacunae. An osteocyte was an osteoblast. When the osteoblast produces the matrix and the matrix hardens and the osteoblast gets stuck in that space, it's not an immature osteoblast, it's a mature osteocyte that sits in that cavity called the lacunae. And osteoclasts, these are involved with bone remodeling. They break down bone. So osteoblasts build bone, the osteoclasts break down bone. They work in opposite ways. So you have this osteoprogenitor cell, and that develops into an osteoblast. What does an osteoblast do? It's going to form the extracellular matrix. But now this osteoblast is going to get stuck in this cavity, and that cavity is called a lacunae. Now the cell is not an osteoblast, it's called an osteocyte. It's a mature cell. Mature cells maintain, M&M. The mature cell maintains the bone tissue. Okay, then we have a very important cell that is a white blood cell, and it's from the white blood cell lineage. And I'll show you when we talk about something called rank and rankle, we'll go over this and see how it comes from stem cells. But this cell right here, that's an osteoclast, it really comes from monocytes. It comes from a monocyte, and monocytes evolve into a macrophage. And the type of, remember, macrophages are phagocytic, they engulf and they eat. So what these osteoclasts do is these ruffled borders, they're called Ruffini endings, they release very strong, potent digestive enzymes. And when those enzymes hit the bone, they break down the bone and release calcium into the bloodstream. So the osteogenic cell is an undifferentiated cell. We know that it will differentiate into an osteoblast. These osteogenic cells are found in the inner surface of the periosteum and in the endosteum. The osteoblasts, these are going to synthesize and secrete collagen fibers, as well as the extracellular matrix. So they're going to be involved in building bone. They're involved in initiating the calcification or the mineralization of all the organic components of bone. Now, when the osteoblast gets stuck in its lacunae, it's now called an osteocyte, which is a mature cell that helps to maintain bone. And the osteoclasts, these are the cells that originate from monocyte colony stimulating factor, but they originate from monocytes. And think of it as like that, like one of those old Pac-Men, the ghost from Pac-Man. They release those very strong, potent digestive lysosomal enzymes and acids that help to break down the bone. So remember, you have compact bone. You have spongy bone here, and we have compact bone here. This is spongy. This is all compact. This is where we have red bone marrow, and then here is yellow bone marrow. Out here is the periosteum. Inside here is the endosteum. So when we look at bone a little bit further, when we look at the compact portion, they're made up of osteons, and osteons have these concentric rings. They're called concentric lamellae. In the center, where there's a central canal or haversian canal, that's where we have blood vessels through here. Here is the periosteum, and you can see that we have a periosteal artery and vein. They come through and they perforate right through the periosteum. And you could see as it breaks through the bone, it starts to go right through the center of every osteon. And that center is called the central canal or the haversian canal. This is all compact, but as you move in where that medullary portion is, that's where you have the trabeculae. That's where the medullary cavity is. Okay, so compact bone, spongy bone, medullary cavity, and the periosteum. Now, these are concentric lamellae, and what we have around the periphery is in between in between osteons, there are interstitial lamellae. What interstitial lamellae represent are old osteons that were broken down because remember, bone is made and broken. Osteoblast, osteoclast, osteoblast, osteoclast. So as the old bone is breaking down and there's bone remodeling taking place, you're left with the remnants of old osteons. The remnant of old osteons are these interstitial lamellae. Okay? When an osteoblast gets trapped, it becomes an osteocyte. It's trapped in its cavity called a lacunae, and the extensions coming off of that are called canalicules. Canalicules are part of a network of the osteocyte that communicates with other osteocytes, and they communicate with one another about the bone integrity to help maintain it. So here's what an osteon looks like. These lamellae are the concentric rings. In the center, that's the central canal or haversian canal. That's where you have blood vessels, you got lymphatics, you got nerve, all through the center. The lacunae, these black cavities, that's where the osteocyte sits, which was at one point an osteoblast that got trapped in its matrix. Then you start to see these little canals coming off of it, these spider-like or jellyfish type like legs looking things. Those are the canalicules. Okay, that is the histology of bone, spongy and compact. Another way of looking at this, it kind of looks like a tree that was chopped down and has all those rings. So going around, those are the concentric lamellae. Here's the haversian canal or central canal. The cavity itself is called a lacunae, and what's inside the lacunae is the osteocyte. And then these extensions, these spider-like extensions that come off, that is the canaliculi. The canaliculi. If we compare spongy bone with the trabecula, right, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different than here. Notice these have the central canal with all these concentric rings around it. This has the lamellae, but notice there is no central or haversian canal in spongy bone. Great. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the blood supply and nerve supply of bone.